Hello everybody, this is Brian Gray with Electric Brewing Supply, and today we're going to go over how to get going with your BCS control unit using a local network. So let's begin. Quickest solution to finding your BCS on your network is a little program that Embedded Control Concepts will offer, which you can find on their wiki under Learn. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find BCS Finder Utility. Go ahead and download that. It's just a small little program that when you click on it, I have it here, when you click on it, it'll search the network for any BCS units you have. In this case, I have one that's up and running, sitting at 1077.147. So we're going to go ahead and pull that up on our internet browser. 10.77.1. And here we go. Now this is a BCS 460. It has 4 temperature probes. So we'll go ahead and get these all set and ready to go. So first things to do, under System Settings, go in here. There are a couple things you can do from this screen. In fact, there's a lot of things you can do from this screen. Communication settings, we're going to rely on whether you want it to automatically get the IP address from the network or whether you want to put one in static or hard. You can also give yourself a graphical user feedback with the HMI builder, and then there's also the tools to calibrate the sensors. All the BCS units that we ship are shipping with temperature probes that are already been the information's already in the BCS for those, so you shouldn't need to calibrate them. Obviously, if you want to fine tune it, get a little more accuracy, you can go ahead and do so with this. Moving towards what we're aiming to do right now, which is just get up and going, we'll go ahead and expand the system inputs and outputs, and we'll see a number of items here. You can usually, if you need to fine-tune your temperature probes, you would do that under these columns here. Again, like I said, these are already coded for the temperature probes that we're shipping. So unless you're building them yourself, the temperature probes yourself from the thermistors up, you won't need to bother with this. So we're going to go ahead and label this unit. Already has four temperature probes wired in and is shipping with 4 temperatures. So we're going to go ahead and label each temperature point. In this case, I tend to stick with the HLT, mash, boil, and then the 4th one is kind of freewheel. You can use it wherever. I use it myself for knockout, and therefore I usually set up most systems with knockout. This panel also has an input, so we're going to go ahead and enable that and disable the other one since there's only one. The input in this case is just a push button, nothing more than that, and I'll show you what kind of handy dandy features that extends for. Down here on outputs, this is going to be the signal going to your relays. This is where you definitely want to make sure you have them tagged. It'll make your life a lot easier further down the road. So we're going to go ahead and label this. First one is HLT. Again, mash, boil. We got water pump, or pump A, whichever terminology you choose, and wort pump. And then I also have an alarm, just a regular old buzzer with an SSR on it, just because I prefer to have something that's not relying on my stereo or my speakers on my computer. But you can use both or either or. So okay, we've got those all inputted. We're going to go ahead and hit apply. It'll take a second, and we're set. Down here under PID and hysteresis output control, you can actually select which output relates to which temperature probe. So if you end up miswiring, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have to redo it. You can just remap it. For those that are using BCS for fermentation, there's also the option to change whether you want to worry about the heat side or the cool side. So if you're too hot, it'll cool, or if you're too cool, it'll heat. But in this case, since this is just for brewing, we're going to just disregard, and everything looks pretty good to us. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. For the gas systems, hysteresis is important. In this case, 4 degrees. Should be okay. Obviously, as you brew, you'll determine what works better for you, and you can again dial it in more here. So we'll minimize that. And then under miscellaneous, you can have various things start up when you boot up. You can have different processes start up when the unit powers back on. This again is handy when you're fermenting, but not so much when you're actually brewing, since you don't tend to want to have your elements kick on when there's no water in there. We can also change the name on the header. And you can add an email address for alerts. I have not used this as of yet. I am building a new system that we'll start testing those out. But this will rely on you having to set up a mail server nearby, probably. Auto ignition, again, relates to gas setup if you don't have a standing pilot on your gas. So this would trip leading to that. Advanced interface customizations. This is going to be, we're moving towards stuff that you more than likely won't bother with. Advanced interfaces is going to be somebody who wants to create their own JavaScript interface. And then again, back up everything that you set up under here, or you can even load stuff that's already been written. In this case, it's a gas setup, so it's going to be all from scratch for me today. And then we also have firmware update. Firmware update is going to be when Embedded Control Concepts rolls out with the latest version. I believe 4.0 will be the next one. You'll need this along with another application to update the BCS. A fair warning on that: be sure to back up everything or you will have it wiped out. So be sure to back up. In fact, it's a good idea in general, once you get it all set up the way you want it, just to back it up anyway. Down here at the bottom, reset the controller, just a reboot button, and then controller to defaults. That'll wipe out everything you set up. So let's go ahead, make sure everything that we've set is good to go, and we'll go ahead and move on forward here. So we're back here in main control. As you see, my names on the temperature probes are now in place, as well as my outputs are in place. And then the inputs. Discrete 1, 2, and 3 are disabled, so it doesn't actually take them off the screen, but there's not going to be anything if you push the button, nothing's going to happen if they were wired. So okay, so we're going to go ahead. I'm just going to create one process today, maybe two. And that is the first step in anyone's brew process, which is to heat that water up to strike temperatures. So we're going to go ahead and click on Edit Processes. And you want to make sure you're under Process 0, and State 0. It's very important as you're putting your processes together that you watch your state. More often than not, people are caught, including myself, where we think we're in one state and come to find out we're in one we had just created, and we end up having to redo it all. So obviously you want to try and mitigate that or minimize that. So we're going to go ahead and give this process a name. This box here will reflect in here, heat to strike. And then we're going to go ahead, first step is just to heat to whatever temperature, or heat to temperature. In this case, I'm just going to put it in for 153 so the next person can read what I'm typing. And then we're going to set our outputs. This is a gas setup again, so we're going to do control, and we're going to use hysteresis control and set the temperature point of 155 in this case. And we're going to go ahead and hit apply. And that'll bump it up. And you notice you see the temperature swing 151 to 155. So when it drops below 151, it will come back on. On gas setups, do not use PID control. It's going to flick it on too quickly for the valve to do anything. So you're going to want to use either hysteresis or directly on. The duty cycle and the PID really only are going to apply to electric setups. So we got that on. In my case, I also cycle the water, so we'll go ahead and turn on the pump. That just kind of speeds up the process, getting it heated up for me. And we're going to add an exit condition. So first things first, I always hit apply, save as we go. That way if something happens, we don't lose it. And then we're going to go ahead and hit exit conditions when the temperature on the first one is greater than or equal to, I want it to be 153. You can obviously, as you brew, you'll tweak this a little bit here and there. So we'll go ahead and hit apply, or we want to also then proceed to the next state, which will hold that temperature. So we'll hit apply. And then from there, we go to state 2. In here, and we want the heat to still be on. Again, we'll go 153. And we'll turn this on. And then the one thing that buzzer I was mentioning earlier, we'll have it go on so that it annoys the person brewing, so they go, hey, I'm ready to brew. And we'll leave that as an exit condition of nothing on the temperature side. But here's where that handy button comes into play, the input. So we're going to go ahead and enable the next exit. And we're going to say when we push the input button to on, it will turn this process off. So what that does is it says, okay, I'm done. So let's shut off this process. And then what we're going to have it do is we're going to come down here to spawn, and we're going to have it turn on the next process. And we can hit apply. And by doing that, what will happen is when this one shuts off, this one, the next one, so process 1, will kick on. So now we're going to cook our mash. And we're going to have it, and we can do a step mash. In this case, you can do a lot of things. You can do a step mash and have it heat through, or you could have it just do a single mash. In this case, I'll just do a single infusion. And we'll label it set to temp. And so we'll have it bring the mash temperature. All the meanwhile, we also want to maintain our HLT. So we're going to bring our mash temperature. Let's go ahead, hysteresis again. And we want it to maintain 150 degrees. So we'll go ahead and put it on 150. We'll hit apply. And that'll save our settings. Meanwhile, also, we're going to have our pump going, since we're going to cycle the mash around. Again, this is unique to each brewer. Not everybody does a continuous cycle of the mash. Not everybody is going to be cooking at 150 degrees. All this is just to give you an idea of what you can do. From here, you can extrapolate and develop where you need it to go. So the last thing I want to do is have it brew, set the temperature, or maintain that temperature for a certain amount of time. So we're going to go ahead and set a timer. And I want it to kick off once it's over a certain amount of time. So we're going to do 1 hour at that temperature I set. And at which point I want it to kick over to the next step. And we're going to go ahead and hit apply. And then we'll go ahead and change over to we got burned by our own work here. So we're going to set the temperature, set the temp. We'll do this again real quick. Okay, so there's that. And then we got mash ready. So we'll apply. And we'll go to next step here. Now we're going to go ahead and leave these on, but I want the timer or the buzzer going. So we're going to go ahead and hit buzzer. And then exit's going to be the input again. Process off. And we'll go ahead and spawn the next one. And in this case, when I'm getting ready to step over, I like to kill the other previous ones just in case. Obviously, you don't want to be dry firing an element or have your kettle sitting there with a flame on it with nothing in it. So we'll go ahead and hit apply. And then we're going to go ahead into process 2. Now at this point we can do mash out, or you could just sit there and say I'll do that manually, so we'll just kick it over to the boil. In my case, we'll go ahead and do the mash out again. Mash out with HLT. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to mash out with the HLT still heating the water to maintain the temperature. And then at some point I want it to be able to switch over to where nothing's on. This really applies a lot to electric, where you don't want to dry fire your elements. So you want to make sure you have a state where you're not quite sure where the water is going to be. So you want to be able to have both elements off and you can move forward. And then at this point with the BK, we're sitting there, we're heating our water before we get ready to boil. But since we don't want to lose the temperature. And since we're mashing out with the flame, I'm not inclined to have the mash being cooked at that point. Obviously, again, this falls under that. As you brew, you'll find the right spot where you want to be. Let's see here. We'll go ahead and put our input again. And that'll send it to the next state. And we'll hit apply. All right. And we got caught again here. Mash out. Turn everything back on here. And we'll go ahead and move to the last step here. Still mashing out. In this case, on the boil, you really could just leave it as on, since obviously you're trying to get it going and keep it going. So we'll go ahead and click our switch again, input, process off. And okay, and at that point, since this is a gas, you can go straight to just a boil, or have boil here. And this is where the brewer is going to have to be actually a little more involved, at least with the gas. Electric, the electric process at this point would be to set your duty cycle. I'll go ahead and release a video here in another week on the on the duty cycle and everything with the electric setup. I just don't have one handy to demonstrate right at the moment. So we'll go ahead and turn on our boil and let that ramp up. What I usually do in my setup is I have it run till it reaches about 210 degrees, and then I want it to yell at me. That way it reminds me, hey, we're ready to, we're good to boil. We can start throwing in the hops, but we don't have to do it that way. We'll go ahead and just leave it as an on, and then there's a basic setup to get you going. From there, the knockout is going to be your process. You can set it up as you need. This should give you a good idea of where to begin. And of course, if there are any questions, Embedded Control Concepts has a forum as well as the wiki here. You can also get help by emailing us at sales@ebrewsupply.com. Hope that works I hope that helps a few people out there. If you have any questions, shoot us an email. There'll be more to come as we're trying to make your guys' lives easier. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.